2016 issue of Louisville Magazine, about 1,000 readers responded to a survey. Louisville Magazine readers are people, for instance, who donate to public radio. That's how I get the magazine. Or who want to read the long articles about Louisville. They are people who are engaged at some level with city issues. But here's what stopped me in my tracks. Within the survey, there were 3 questions. Is Louisville a racist city? Is Louisville a racially segregated city? And if that answer is yes, how big a problem is that? So, is Louisville a racist city? 64% said no, and 36% of respondents said yes. But 77% of respondents answered that Louisville is a racially segregated city. And of that, 59% of those respondents who think Louisville is racially segregated also think that this is a big problem, a 4 or 5 on a 5-point scale. So you know, I'm Cathy Hinko, and I work in a nonprofit research and advocacy membership organization called Metropolitan Housing Coalition, MHC, which for over 25 years has focused on fair and affordable housing issues in the Louisville metro area and has sought to galvanize people into action. So I am going to ask you to help me understand how to take our community acknowledgement of a problem of intense racial segregation in Louisville and transmogrify it into action for change. The slideshow, taken from various reports MHC has produced, highlights the existence and impact of segregation in Louisville and shows some underlying causes. But we are all already aware that there is severe segregation. Somehow, we disconnect that reality from active racial bias. We know that Louisvillians think there is segregation, and segregation, not a word that means choice. And probably people were thinking about West Louisville. But East End respondents live in some of the most racially isolated housing in Louisville, with white concentrations of over 95% in a city where 23% of people are African American. Nonetheless, we see one form as concentration and the other as segregation because clearly we know something is really wrong. With this acknowledgement, where is the ownership of the issue so that any individual says, I need to change this. I need to make sure this ends now. Is it because we're comfortable? Is it good enough? I mean, we don't have riots. Is it because we are secretly happy we keep people of color in small geographic areas? Are we glad we have categories of people herded into small areas and away from us without us actually voting for that to happen? Do we think segregation is unconnected to current policies? Do we assume that segregation is some kind of perpetual motion machine divorced from any human cause? Perhaps some new law of physics? Or is it that if we are all guilty, then none of us are guilty? Surely if we stop and think, we know we can identify the policies that make this happen. What if I told you that, for instance, zoning laws are part of the problem? Would that make you relieved you have something to focus on, or want to run to the hills as something too arcane and remote for you to work on? Is it just not sexy enough? Zoning laws allow or prohibit categories of people from having access to housing in areas of our city. For instance, almost 3/4 of the land zoned for residential use bars, by law, putting in multifamily housing, which is a well-known method of creating housing affordable to lower wage workers. Hannah Arendt talked about the banality of evil. Well, nothing is more banal than zoning. We even call it zoning instead of laws that prohibit or allow categories of people to live in areas. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe that nomenclature would get people's attention. And the hurdle may be that to change these policies of where people in categories are allowed to live requires overturning the laws that were put into place with active bigotry, but are now so far remote in time that those policies seem cleansed of animus simply by the passage of time. Most importantly, what in the vocabulary needs to change so people want to act? Is racism too harsh a word and we shy away from it? But will less harsh words get people to say, I have responsibility for this, and I need to change this? How do we develop a common and inspiring language if we are to move forward towards fair housing? MHC actually invites your comments and conversation, and you can email us at info@metropolitanhousing.org, participate in the Fair Housing Coalition, or call us at 584-6858. Thank you.